Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us as Black TARDIS steals the keys to the TARBIS to talk Doctor Who with members of the Black Girls Create community. So the past 2 seasons of Doctor Who have featured 2 people of color as companions to the first female iteration of the Doctor. On screen, the show is extremely diverse, or as diverse as ever, but the storytelling hasn't lived up to its promise to deliver for real representation for people of color. We've gathered a panel of fans to discuss these problems, the problems of casting of people of color as series regulars, and colorblind casting of small roles without engaging with the identity of the actors. We have a great group of panelists here for you. They're each going to get a chance to introduce themselves. For your introductions, if you could just give us your names, your pronouns, your location, and how you're involved in the Doctor Who fandom. So I know some of you have blogs and podcasts and all these things, and we want to make sure that anyone listening gets the chance to check those out. I'm DJ. I'm the moderator for today. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently in Arkansas, so I'm in the South, and really I am a fan that is reading the blogs and listening to the podcasts that y'all put out. Don't have any of my own generated content yet, but I'm really happy to be here and really excited about anything Doctor Who. I think next we have Caitlin.
All right, I'm Caitlin, and I co-host the Queer Archive podcast with my partner, Brenna. My pronouns are they, them, and I am in Fullerton, California. So that's Southern California area right outside of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel. My pronouns are she, her. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I have been writing reviews for Doctor Who for a couple of years, and I wrote about the Fugitive Doctor for Radio Times last year.
I love it. Nicole.
I am, sorry, my voice is cracking a little bit. Sorry. I am Nicole, also known on the interwebs as Black TARDIS. And I am in Los Angeles, Southern California. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. And I'm just here to have a good time.
Thank you. And you can tell us more about Black TARDIS later. Talia.
Hey y'all, I'm Talia. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a poet and a writer and a burgeoning podcaster. I wear a lot of hats. Of the many things I have a hand in, most relevant to this conversation are articles I tend to write critiquing various aspects of fandom and media, particularly in the realm of Doctor Who, including one article directly related to the topic we're discussing today that was slightly explosive, to say the least. My podcast is Into the Archives. It's a fan fiction podcast, so it's not always related to Doctor Who, but a lot of the fanfics that are discussed happen to be Doctor Who fanfics because that's just what I read.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, we've definitely carved out time to talk a little bit about your article and the response of some fans to it and what that tells us about like the fandom and where we are. So I'm excited. All right, I guess we'll just jump into the questions then. Our first question is really an opinion one. Which era of New Who do you think is the most diverse? So do you think gives us the most diversity in who's on screen, who we're seeing between Chibnall, Melfett, and RTD? Are you okay? I can call them, folks. I just feel like just join in. I'm like, I have great teacher wait time. We can do this. But if me calling works better, I can do that too. Mel, you look like you were about to jump in.
I was like, that's a hard question. That was me saying, oh, I don't know.
That's fair. The answer can also, yeah.
I'm giving this a very grudging, probably Chibnall. Because two people of color companions, stories that actually have to do with people of color, not just them being there, but like they are essential to the story. So, and you know, people of color in the writer's room. So all of that I would give him that there's more effort going on. Still a long way to go, but
definitely.
Yeah, I would agree. It's slightly begrudgingly. I think there were, I mean, I know some people might say RTD or Moffat, but I'm pretty sure, if I'm recalling correctly, that season 2 had like zero, like if I'm remembering correctly, they didn't even have any. I think they had no women writers and maybe no women directors at all. Yeah, Caitlin, you're shaking your head. Yeah. So, and I mean, season 2 is also my least favorite season, so that that tracks. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, I would definitely say, and Moffat is just no.
There's not much to work with there.
There's just not much to work with there. No. No. So yeah, Chibnall it is.
Is that me being called on in the chat? All right. Yeah, I would agree. Hands down, it's Chibnall, but it is not by much. I would agree that Chibnall's era has not delivered on inclusion. And can we talk about how diversity is not inclusion, first of all? In some areas, I'm done talking about diversity, and I think a lot of us are. We have been asking to talk about inclusion, and to get to inclusion, the conversation has to be reparations, honestly. And that's like y'all are saying, it's not featuring marginalized bodies, people of color. It is centering people of color. And that's something that even Chibnall's era has really, really struggled to do with, which is impressive because with a main cast that includes people of color. So I have, we've included the Bechdel test and the Duvernay test in some of our, well, in every podcast that we do and in every episode that we review. And it's shocking how there's episodes that still can't pass those tests with people of color in the main cast. So it's like, wait, so asking for, obviously, not them to just be a part of the main cast, but what does that mean? How are you representing people? Because sometimes you're always representing people by their absence even. So it's like, I think of Whoopi Goldberg saying, hey, by the way, I'm not in the future based on Star Trek until they put Black people in the future. So there's a presence there that is absence. It's like, you're saying that we just aren't there. Cool. So whether or not you're putting us there, you're saying something. But anyways, so I would say, yeah, it is definitely not delivering on inclusion. But I think what's happening in Chibnall's era is it's more performative. But that's not to say that every era of Doctor Who hasn't had their fair share of moments of being performative. Absolutely. There's a lot of like, give me woke cookies, pretty much in any season that you wanted to point out. But this is the first series or couple of series or era that has really embedded it into the fabric of the show and into their marketing. And it's a part of what they're selling. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. But there's definitely more of an effort.
So, Nicole, did you want to add to that?
And I guess I have to say that for me, the initial answer that comes to mind is actually RTD. Because I'm thinking of diversity in terms of if I turn on the television and the show is playing, am I noticing more people of color just existing in the space? And I feel like in my mind, it's still RTD because, I mean, like there are episodes where like Marcus' whole family, now, again, we're talking about the diversity of what is being presented. So you're seeing a family full of Black people, which is surprisingly very rare and on this show and on television. So Black shows. So up top, I would say RTD just based on like at any given time you can turn on the TV, you're probably going to see somebody who isn't white. Now, are they centered? That wasn't the question, so that's not the answer, but they are there to everyone's point. So, which is what this conversation is about, because obviously just existing and being on a screen doesn't have value if you're not doing anything with those people and like actually exploring them as people, and they're not just like a brown person in the background or, you know, a Black person walking by with a bag. You know what I mean? Like you have to have a story that that gives them value in the show and in the story. So that's my answer.
No, I love that. And it kind of leads us into the next question. And a lot of you really touched on this. And I love what Caitlin had to say about diversity versus inclusion. So the next question is about you personally and when you felt the most strongly represented in this series. And you can go from any of the identities that you're willing to share with us or dive into. But yeah, regardless of, I guess, what was being presented and what was being promoted, when did you truly feel represented, if at all, on screen in Doctor Who? And anyone could start.
I'll start. So for me, I love Martha, but Martha does not represent the reality of my existence other than being a Black woman, which is that's a big overlap. Obviously, there are a lot of experiences that we will have that other people will not have. That being said, I otherwise cannot really, I don't have a big family. I didn't go to medical school. Like, that's not me, but I love Martha, right? So the first person I actually connected with in terms of just like lifestyle, like who they are, is Donna, which is why it's kind of interesting, because it's like, this is the white woman, but you take that away, everything else I feel I relate to quite a lot in terms of like, yeah, I'm a temp, I got a job, I don't really care about any of these, like, I'm just working to work, I don't have any kind of like, you know, like you just don't have no passion for anything, and just like living with family who are always on your back, and you're just like, please, like, let me just go to work and like not my business. And then, you know, you have an opportunity to go and explore, and obviously that changes. It doesn't change who you are, but it just reveals who you are. And like, to me, that was the person I really connected with. But obviously, that was not, I don't think, intentional. They weren't trying to, you know, connect with me. But I would say the first time I like felt that somebody was trying to represent me was Bill, because I was like, okay, it's a Black woman. She has natural hair, which I know it sounds like oh yeah, she has natural hair, but like, it's not that Martha, as an example. Have you ever seen Martha in the show with like anything other than like a nice flat iron blowout situation? No,
Martha will
so, like,
come
even
out
in water
a
and stuff,
fight
like,
scene with hair laid. Not a thing out of
right. So it's like,
no
again,
fun.
these are small things, right? So having a Black woman character with natural hair, like with a curly fro, and then she's queer, she's gay. I'm like, yeah, this is me. This is the person, my avatar in the show. Like, I'm finally just somebody I can literally, like, this is me in the show. Like, there's a lot of overlap as well in terms of, and I guess that's what's similar with like Donna. It's like a person who's like, you don't have like your own path because you're still trying to figure out what you want to do, who you are. And again, that's the thing I related to. But yeah, that's the first time I was like, okay, this character is like, she's mine. She belongs to me. I can claim her and I can like embody her and like cosplay or whatever. And it doesn't have to be a bigger conversation about like, does this fit or does it work? So yeah.
Yeah, I would say very much the same. Martha, so I started watching right. So the first season I watched live was season 6. So at the time when I started watching Doctor Who, we'd gone all the way up to Amy and Rory were the most recent, those were up to that point, those were all the companions we had. So the first character I really, really loved was Martha, but I didn't really identify with her or any. And the thing was, I didn't really identify with any of the characters because when I started watching Doctor Who, I was 14. So maybe 15. So I was like a teenager and these were all adults. So I was like, I wasn't identifying with any of them. I was just like, these are all cool TV shows. Like, these are all cool characters on this TV show. And I'm going to cosplay as Martha because she's the only Black one. So I cosplayed as Martha because she was the only Black one. And that was about it. I didn't identify with any of them. They were just cool characters on this TV show that I liked. And none of their character arcs really spoke to me because I was like a teenager and they were just people that I observed. So the first time I felt truly represented was with Bill, because at that point I was in college, and at that point I like hadn't really figured out that I was non-binary yet. I just knew that I was some variety of queer. So I like, there was, this like young woman who like wore natural hair like I did, and she liked women like I did, and she wore a lot of fun patterns like I did, and I was like, and we were roughly in the same age range, and she wasn't like a student, but she ended up working, and she was working, but then she ended up being the doctor's student, and it was very much like that sort of like mentor relationship. And like, as someone who has like often gotten along better with people who were older than me than with people who were my own age, that was just something that I connected with a lot. And so I just really loved Bill so much, which was part of how her story ended was just so devastating, and was just so like heartbreaking for me. And so honestly, like with her season, like her later episodes just bother me so much that honestly, whenever I rewatch Bill episodes, I like rewatch her 4 episodes up to Knock Knock, and then I like watch Eaters of Light, and that's the only Bill episodes I really watch.
Aw.
Like, those are the only 5 episodes I watch. Because everything else is just, I can't. And then I read a lot of Bill fan fiction, and that's how I cope.
Aw.
Mel, you look like you want to jump in.
Oh, well. This is gonna sound like kind of strange, but
Ready for it.
when I first started watching Doctor Who, it was like at the beginning of the New Who era. And I related a lot to Rose because we were both young. Like, I wasn't as young as she was. I just graduated from college, but like we were both working these nowhere jobs that we hated, and like I wanted nothing more than somebody to swoop into my life and just take me away and show me all these beautiful sights. And like, we both lost our fathers when we were young, and the thought of like being able to go back in time to meet my father, like I wouldn't hesitate. Like, I would do the same thing too. But like, that pretty much ended when 10 came along and she lost her mind over him, because I am not giving my life up for no man. I am sorry. I'm like, Rose and I parted ways. I'm sorry.
Can no longer relate.
It's terrible. As I said, it's my least favorite season.
So like with what everybody else is saying, Bill was probably Bill was it for me. Like we're both like natural hair, both queer, and I like that she's a little lost, she's a little scared, but she's still trying so hard, and I love her for that.
Yeah, I also loved her like dedication to doing both, right? To being whisked away and traveling, but also having a real life and like friends, you know, like, and like being home. I know it's something a lot of companions struggle with, and I just really resonated with Bill being like, I want to go on dates. I want to hang with my friends. I also want to go fight the dialects with you, but like, let me check my schedule. And all the other parts of her identity too.
She wasn't like, you know, my life on Earth is the worst thing possible.
Exactly.
I just want to be with the doctors 24/7. No, she was still living her life, and that was great.
Which would have been easy to like, and thank goodness they did it. Like as a Black woman, be like, here's the doctor here to save her from Black trauma. Thankfully, that was not it. And we were able to see her like navigate both.
That was actually the thing that I had initially liked about Clara, was that she had like a stable life and like enjoyed and like she had her doctor life balance, and then she lost her doctor life balance. And that was part of why I had like Clara's whole arc was an issue for me, because I really liked the idea of like Clara having a life on Earth, and then having like a life with the doctor, but then that sort of it sort of like fell apart. And I think it's it would have been, I don't know. I think Clara's arc is like really interesting too, but I would have liked to see a Clara who cared more about the people she left behind and didn't like have her whole family that supposedly existed but maybe didn't. Like, Clara's home life confused me.
No nuance for you, Clara. Sorry.
Nuance for you, Clara.
Yeah, not allowed.
We're definitely gonna have time to dive into more of like those crushing moments, but I want to hear from Caitlin about any moments in this series where they felt really strongly represented.
So I have a very similar experience where you have kind of two answers to this, where one, you're like, oh, I kind of really just don't see myself in the show. And I largely feel represented by the show in metaphor. So there's moments of, I'm like, oh, I resonate with that at a metaphorical level, because this relates to, you know, like, you know, queer trauma or racial trauma, or just being a marginalized body or an outsider. So there's definitely moments like that. I think the 13th Doctor is definitely has several of those moments, because she just reads as super genderqueer to me. And I have resonated in a way with her character more than anyone else on the show, like ever before, in like really concentrated moments. And then I would say I absolutely resonate with Bill as like a really explicit gay character on the show. And I resonate with her most when she's at her like most free, most happy lesbian self, you know. That's where I felt like just connected to that character. And then I would say Yaz, with the little that we know about her, there's definitely several things that I am like, oh Yaz, I get you. Like, you are Slytherin to the core. You are ambitious, and you are like, you really care about like being like in the know and getting shit done, and like you really care about like the authoritative figures in your life, and you really want them to like really like you and impress them. So like I feel like 13 is kind of that for her, and that's kind of probably how I would act on the TARDIS. I would be like I really need the doctor to think I'm really smart and cool. So I think those are the three characters that I've had moments where I really get them, or they really get me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. Take a deep breath, prepare for the next question. Talia started us going there, but what thinking about, and it can have to do with your sort of favorite characters or not, or maybe a smaller character, but what was a moment that really just felt like a failure in representation, or like a disappointing, like if the team could have done anything other than this, I would be happy. Yeah, anything that really hits home.
My guess is all of our answers will be mainly the same. I have no doubt in my mind that there are definitely several answers to this question, but for Bill's storyline, there are so many missteps the way that last finale played out that it's hard to know where to start, honestly. The fact that, and I'll just kind of go into it a little bit, y'all know, but like, let's just get on the table, like just how many things were so upsetting, and for a character that we've all seen, we resonate with, is the closest thing that we've like actually seen ourselves in. And then this, so the fact that the doctor made her go on a mission that she told him, hey, I feel unsafe about this mission. I feel unsafe about several factors about this. The fact that she didn't want to go, that she was then at the jump of this mission shot in the chest violently by a man in blue, that also that species conjures up memories of remember that time Bill was called racist on this show, because that was funny to call a Black person racist. And then later in the finale, a Black queer woman was put in a conversion therapy room where she was operated on without her permission, without her consent. That's not at all, a part of Black women's history, about Black queer women's history. And then she was specifically punished after being turned into a Cyberman for her emotions. And it was for her emotions that she was expressing, like very, very common human reactions to being stripped of her humanity. And she was treated like a monster. And then her emotions again were framed as an inherent danger to those who are around her. And then she was shot in her own home, again, where she was supposed to feel safe. This was a safe house. And she was put outside and she couldn't be around children. Like, how many queer people watching that were like, oh, like, love seeing a queer person being told you're not safe around children. That's on top of course, all of this like racialized trauma that just is beat for beat what happened to Bill. And then, just hearing her say, like, people are never going to feel safe around me again. People will only see me as this monster. Like, whew, that is so on the nose. Because it's like, of course, Bill is like this beautiful ball of sunshine, but because of what they did to her in this storyline, that's not what people see. And then at the end, they're like, oh, we can just kind of unbury her. It's totally fine. She'll get turned into space oil with her girlfriend. And that should pretty much take care of all of your worries, right? Which is really like condescending and just like feels really hard as an audience to swallow, because we still had to sit through not only the death, but the trauma after the death, what she was turned into. And then, of course, like unbearing your gaze is still not being able to imagine a story that doesn't demand their death in the first place, that doesn't depend on their death as a plot point. And her as a Black lesbian, it still views the life of a Black lesbian as more expendable, and it requires her to be like this magical queer sacrifice for everyone else in the story, because this story was not about her anymore. This was about Missy and the Doctor at this point. So like she had to die for that plot point. And then all this was her entryway into being able to access her happy ending, which she should really have just been able to receive in life without death. End of story. And so I just, like, so many little things there. I don't think I can ever recover from that. So I'm with Talia. It's a really hard section of Doctor Who to watch. And you really have to like gear up to like watch everything else with Bill and be able to like enjoy it in isolation. And I still love her so much as a character, and I'll still be able to take what I can from her and, you know, dive into fanfic and like keep it safe in the fandom. But that's not how it should have. It's just not how it should have gone. There's so many things that like could have been done differently.
Yeah, I would say that's like pretty much exactly how I feel. That's my number one like failure of the series, for exactly all the reasons that you just said. If I had to say my number two, just so that we're not repetitive, I would have to say Grace at the beginning of series 11, just because the lost the lost potential with Grace's death. I feel like the fact that she like, and the fact that she dies is just such a waste on so many levels. And like her fridging is just, it's so like, it's not just that she dies and would have made a fantastic companion. It's that she dies, she's everything that would have made, like, she's everything that a companion would and should be. And it's embodied in this moment where, like, she says to Graham, "Is it wrong that I'm enjoying this?" And he says yes, but she goes and does it anyway, because she is like, she's like living, she is like fully embodying this like companion energy, this like, and this sort of like, she is like everything that we've come to see and want in a companion. And she goes forward, she takes initiative, she does, and she fights for the people that she loves, and she does the thing. And Graham is just like scared and reluctant and doesn't want to go forward with things, and yet he's the one who gets to live, and he's the one who gets to go forward. And then throughout all of the remaining seasons, like, every time she pops up, she's only there to like further his narrative, like further his development, and to a certain extent Ryan's, but much lesser than Graham's. And so it's such a waste, because like, there's so much more that Grace could have brought to the show. Like, if Grace could have lived, and like what she could have brought into the world of Doctor Who is just like, the boundless potential of it like almost blows my mind. And like, and so that's part of what makes me like, the fact that she was fridged, and the fact that she was used to further Graham's narrative, and that Graham is the companion that we know the most about, is something that makes me super angry. But the fact that we never got to see Grace as a fully realized person, and that we never got to see what she would have done if she got to travel with the Doctor, just makes me sad. It just makes me really sad that we never got to see that, that we never got to experience that. Because like, it just, yeah. I have a lot of feelings.
I know. Yeah, Nicole or Mel, you can. Oh, was Caitlin gonna jump in?
No, I'm good, but definitely same. Yep.
Well, Caitlin pretty much said perfectly for Bill. I'll say two things. I love Martha, but her season infuriated me. They had her working in a shop to support the doctor in Blink. In Human Nature, they had her literally working as a maid with people saying racist comments to her. The doctor fired her. This is just, it's a mess. It was so bad, the way she was treated that entire series. I'm like, he acted like her liking him was like an insult. It was it was horrible. It was horrible. And I hated it so much. I'm like, why are you treating her so bad? She hasn't done anything to you. It was a mess. But my second one is just it's a one-off episode. Midnight. In that the hostess was a Black woman and she ended up saving everybody on that train car or on that ship. And she didn't have a name. I don't know why, but that's just, it stuck with me for so long because you're going to have the Black woman save everybody, of course, by sacrificing herself. And you're not even going to give her a name? What is this? It's so messed up. It still makes me angry.
And that's perfect to piggyback off of, because those are my same answers. Obviously, Bill is, in the whole series, is like by far the worst, because it's literally every type of thing you think that should not happen happened. And like, y'all didn't pull back on a single one of these, and so that's obviously upsetting. But before Bill, we had a few seasons before that. Martha's entire season is very just upsetting to watch. When you especially think about the fact that like Martha is like taking care of this white man, in like various time zones, like places where she would be, actively in danger, just being out in the street. Like in the 60s, she's working at a shop and he's a white man. Like, why would that be? You clearly have the knowledge and the ability to do this job if y'all need, to live, but whatever. But what part was like, I would say shocking to me, because did they think about it? Wasn't intentional, is that like, and I mean, this is her whole entire family works for the master. Her Black family, who were pulled into this thing that they really honestly was just not a part of, but because they're her family and she was with the doctor, they get pulled into it. They're working on this ship for the master. Like, I'm like, is this irony, or did y'all just think over your head? Like, just the thought that like y'all, like somebody sat and wrote that whole script, and it's like saying the master while these Black family is in the background, they playing mate, like they were like maids and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So it's one of those things. That's the first time I was just like, okay, clearly I have to watch the show with like a very strong compartmentalization situation, because I can enjoy the stories as they exist, but if I don't think about, I have to watch the show the way they write the show, which you clearly are not thinking about race, and thus you are making decisions that don't make sense. So if I watch the show, we're like, this is not intentional, or this is not being thought about, which is of course like you shouldn't have to make those concessions when you watch something, but like you kind of have to, because then you have to think about, if this is intentional, why would you like what? Why would you do that? So yeah, that to me is like one of the first things where I was like, okay, this is very problematic. But also midnight. And the fact that you can say the hostess and people know who you're talking about because that's how it is, but the fact that you have to say the hostess and can't say like Alberta or like a name, the fact that she's not named is like, and it's again because that's something they're aware of, because then the doctor's like, we never got her name, and like they dwell on the fact that like y'all didn't take the time to know this person's name. But this goes kind of back to the point where that relationship with that character is different because that is a Black woman. It will still be bad regardless of who that character is because of just how we value people, and like, oh, she's just a hostess, so we don't have to learn her name. But then you add on to that the fact that that's a Black woman who are already like, we be treated that way when we are the CEOs of stuff, and people trying to ask us like, can you give me some coffee? Like, I pay your bit. Like, I am the one that literally signs the checks, but because you see a Black woman in this space, you think I'm here to serve you. So again, it's a lack of putting together the identity of the actor with how they are going to be treated in the show as a character, and not realizing that once you and that's anybody, once you cast this person, you then have to think about how is that person going to move in a space, and a Black woman is going to move differently than a white man. So you obviously have to take those things into consideration, but even a Black woman and a white woman are going to be treated differently, because you see, like, even with Skye in the same episode, it's like, it takes a while before suspicion hits, and like, people are like, oh, you know, you get the benefit of doubt for a while, but like, people are very willing to go along with stuff if the character that's playing it is not, you know, I mean, like, I'm pretty sure if that was a Black woman who had started repeating and stuff, that she would have been out that airlock 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it just would have been different. So yeah, those are the times where I really was like, okay, this is upsetting me. Like, this is upsetting me and my homegirl. And it's crazy because Midnight is one of my favorites to watch, mainly because it kind of like, it's always so jarring when it happens. I'm just like, every time. But like, I kind of love pain, so that's my fault. But yeah, I agree with like everything everyone has said. These are all like, it's just like when you watch the show, it's like you kind of forget, or you like, that's when I get taken out and I have to remember, like, this is not for me. It obviously is not for me. They are not thinking about me as an audience member. And so yeah, those are, I think, all of the like really standout disappointments.
Yeah, that moment with Martha and Martha's family, the way you described it is how I felt. And I don't know the episode names like y'all do, but the episode when Rose and the doctor finally go back and they're talking with Mickey, and he's like, you left, and everyone thought it like I did something. Like, she's like expecting like a sort of welcome or like a kind reunion or whatever, and they play it off as just like, oh, this was hard, and like I had suspicion for a bit, but it was fine. And I'm like, this is a Black man. And like Rose, like I was just like, I was so taken out in that moment of like how awful all of that might have been from like just, you know, years of history of this, right? And it took so much for me to get back in, and I felt like it wasn't given enough weight or attention. And there are a lot of great things about Rose and a lot of things I do like love in her arc, but I couldn't even, you know, going forward when they try to sort of come back and give Mickey more of a role and more of an arc of his own and everything. I'm just like, that it's just those moments of things that clearly the writers don't realize how much pain is in those moments, and like how much, and it's so stark and it's so like, and yeah, so that's what it made me think of. It made me think of my first time watching that too, and being like, oh, I hate it all.
Yeah, this brings me back to, so I might have over prepared for this. I made several pages of notes.
I love it.
Because I'm a bit extra. But one of the things that I wrote down, because I knew we were going to be talking about like diversity and representation and inclusion, was I wrote down like a specific definition of the difference between diversity and representation. which I feel like we've been talking about, but I feel like is like kind of relevant, which to just like sort of encapsulate it, which is that diversity is like a range of races, genders, abilities, religions, and ethnicities, where representations is characters with lines, backstory, plot, and integrity, who are ideally written by people who share those identities and backgrounds. And representation is about truthful depiction of various life experiences on screen. And the thing is that writers just need to be cognizant of when they're leaning into stereotypes or storylines, and it's not representation if the character's identity isn't taken into account when they're written. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about characters like the hostess on Midnight, or like what I wrote about in my article about Leo in the most recent New Year special, where there are these characters that they're written and it's this issue with the colorblind casting of, if these characters aren't, if what they're written isn't, it's not taken into account who who might be playing them. And once that person is cast, who is cast in that role isn't reevaluated, then that's a problem. It's something that I know I was able to go to an event. I think some of you were there with Vinay Patel, where he talked about how he took into account, like in his episodes, he talked about like how he took into account in his writing the casting of the characters that he was writing. And I thought that was really important, and I thought it was really heartening that he was talking about how he did that with his episodes. And I think, that's a really great step for writers to be doing. And I just wish that all of the writers in Doctor Who were doing the same thing, because it's like pretty obvious that in certain episodes that's not happening.
Yeah. And I would love to hear from everyone about like those specific moments in episodes. Like, where was there casting that was clearly colorblind, that was not representational? And like, are there any of those minor characters that really still stay with you, and why?
I'll jump in here. So I wrote an article as well for just about colorblind casting, and about how when you write a character and then you cast a person for that character, you then have to obviously take the identity into account. So the person I used was wow, I am really blanking on the name right now. Lenny Henry played, what is his name? Y'all, I am so blanking, and I literally just looked at this like a second ago. But
his name was Barton.
Yeah, Barton. So the character, and this is a spoiler, but the character is like a tech genius. He's like a Bezos type situation. I don't know, but like there's a point where they talk about him being like the only like Black kid in like the computer science kind of program, like, so they at that moment have acknowledged this is a Black man, right? So we know that he has had a different experience. But then in the second parter of the this is for the 2-parter season 12 premiere. In the second part, he like kidnaps his mom, ties her up, and she is killed. Now, because he's a Black man, that is a Black woman we are watching be bound and then killed on camera. And again, it would be bad for any race of person playing that character, but you add in the additional trauma of it being a Black woman, and you have now changed the entire dynamic. On top of that very fact, it was just a really bad story choice. Like, it didn't work for the story regardless, because later on, the team, you know, the doctor and the companions come in, find the person, find his mom, and he left a video like, there's my mom, she's dead. And I'm like, we didn't have to see it if you just don't explain what happened. Like, so you just show this Black woman being like abused for what reason? Because it didn't serve the narrative at all, right? So if, hey, why would you make the perspective? But also, once you now cast Black people here, why would you not think about, okay, well, you know, since we have written this like torture scene essentially, or not torture, but like she's tied up and she's being like monologued at, like, maybe we don't need it. Like, maybe we don't need it because it's a lot of trauma for no narrative resolution. And then in that same exact episode, like, the doctor is a Nazi. Now the doctor, we know that, I mean, not the doctor, sorry, the master is a Nazi. Now we know that the master is not physically looking like himself. There's a filter. So, you know, other Nazis see a white man. However, we are watching an actor of color in full regalia in front of a swastika flag in the background, very casual. And it's not, again, it would be upsetting regardless, but it's much more upsetting when you think about how that person would be treated by that character if they were in that space. Like, just think about it like that. But then they utilize, so again, they're aware of the fact that they have a person of color here, because then they have the doctor unmask him so that the Nazis can see a brown person in the Nazi regalia, right? So they weaponize the fact that it's a brown person and a person that is not white. And again, these are choices that you make when I imagine that they had cast the master maybe before this was written, so that was a choice they made consciously. Whereas I think with Barton, they probably just wrote a character and then cast somebody who, you know, from a list of like, oh, we love these people, let's cast them, and that's who they put with that character. But the problem is that in all these instances, once you change that element, and I hate that like race is that important, but we all know it is, because we walk outside and like you make snap judgments based on how people look. We just do that. We do have time to create a story, craft the way that people are seeing the person. You then have the responsibility to like think about all the ways that people are going to see this character. And so, like, when I leave the house, I'm just Black, right? I can't control what people see. I can only control how I behave. When you're a writer, you control how the character behaves, but you also control what the audience sees and how the audience perceives them. That is your job, and that is what you're doing. So every choice you make is going to reframe how the audience views a character. And so when you make conscious choices about like casting certain people, you're bringing the assumptions with them. So you have to do the job then of like, let me challenge those assumptions or let me play with those assumptions, but you have to be aware of them. And the problem with colorblind casting is you're not aware of the assumptions that people are bringing to these characters. So it changes the story because that's just inherent. Like, no matter who you cast, women, a man or a woman, non-binary person, that changes the story because of how people perceive them. You add race on top of that. You add presentation on top of that. And like, that could be anything. Like, a very tall, slender man is gonna have a different presentation than even a fat man that's short, right? Even though they're both men, that's still something that people are gonna have assumptions about. So the fact that you just write whole entire characters that have these large narrative, like they have a lot of narrative weight, but then you don't think about all of the things that are happening, like once they are on screen, like all the assumptions people are making about them. You are literally just, you're not telling a good story because you're not utilizing the fact that people are going to have assumptions and then playing with those. You're just putting the character in front of people and then letting how I see them dictate the story that I'm seeing. So everybody's watching the show and we are getting a different story because we're basically putting the story together in our own heads based on our assumptions of that character. I see a Black woman on screen and I already have a whole idea of what I think this character is, like using Grace as an example. I can, like, Grace is I can see Grace so perfectly in my mind as a character because I have so many, because I know Black women, right? I'm around Black women, you know what I mean? So But a white person who might not have a lot of Black friends might not have none of that context. So they don't care. They don't see the same thing that I'm seeing. But you as the writer, it's your responsibility then I would say they did a good job with race, but then they obviously did not give us a chance to do anything with all of those wonderful qualities that they put in front of us. But that's a different point. But my main thing is just once you cast somebody, you now have to do the job of making that actor and making that character a real representation of what that actor brings, because you can't change that. I mean, the actor is who they are, right? So you then have to utilize that, and you can't ignore it like so much. And I would say Chibnall's era is the most egregious because they do it for, I assume, every character that isn't scripted, like main characters. I believe they just put out a casting call and then like, okay, well, this person works for this, we're gonna cast them, and they never go back and change the script to match the person, which is like to Talia's article with Resolution, I don't know which one. The last Dalek story. Yeah, that changes the entire story because who has a different history with body autonomy and a relationship with authority that is completely different than like, your average white man. But again, you have to think about that.
Mel or Caitlin, did you want to jump in?
I would say when they chose to bring Rigsy back as somebody who was accused of murder was it accused or convicted? I can't remember which one it was, but it all being an elaborate trap, started by a white woman to trap white man, and this Black kid is caught in the middle and he's thinking he's gonna die this entire time. No. No, that was not a good thing. I mean, when you think of the long and ugly history of Black men being accused by white women, being accused by white men of crimes, and then getting killed for them, and then you're just gonna have this storyline and throw it out there like nobody's gonna have a problem with it. No, it wasn't a good look.
Yeah, it was like, we wanted you to bring Rigsy back, but not like that.
Not like that.
No.
Yeah, I agree. And the example I thought of was in the previous season, I believe, with Time Heist. And that is like a great episode for a study on like why race matters in casting for like multiple reasons, because it both does the two different ways you can do this. It both like totally didn't see race and totally did see it, because you see like one of the opening scenes is the setting is this hyper ultra rich bank in outer space. And so they're trying to make it look super futuristic. So you see a plethora of people walking around and they're really trying to sell that this is the future. So all the white people are wearing super futuristic get-ups that's just like, like Gucci garbage bags, but make it fashion, and like neon colors and plastic and like weird makeup and stuff. And then you see Black people wearing really like ambiguous, generic Pan-African clothing that just looks like it was taken out of like this decade, which is like, oh, you obviously saw race there because of how you costumed that those extras, because it revealed, hey, clothing from like non-white cultures is already regarded as so other to to white audiences that you might as well like throw it in a bucket with like alien super futuristic clothing. Like it's just a big bucket of other. And so that's like a moment. Oh, also there was like was 𝗠𝗘𝗃𝗧𝗦 in that? There's also like this reoccurring extra who they do this to all the time. He's an amazing extra. He's been in so many different franchises. 𝗠𝗃𝗧𝗦, he's super cool, but like they dress him in like really racialized clothing all the time, no matter what era, no matter what like period of history, whether or not it's relevant. And so you're like, you obviously see it until you don't, until it's like an excuse. And then in that same episode, this is the scene that I was going to bring up, where it's a very similar argument that you're bringing up, Mel, with 𝗣𝗔𝗡𝗘𝗧𝗦. Whereas I feel with 𝗣𝗔𝗡𝗃𝗧𝗏, the story is a little bit aware of it, just a little bit, but not enough. And in this story, there's like no awareness whatsoever. The opening scene is the purpose of the scene is to establish the security of the bank, to establish that the security of this particular bank is extremely just efficient and extremely powerful. So how do they prove that? They accuse an innocent Black man of being suspicious. They say something to the degree of, your guilt is detected. They approach this man with no jury, no trial, just execution, and like violently soup up his brains in front of everyone. And that's on purpose. It's because the purpose of it is to be a spectacle. It's to be a warning. And that is not the only time we see this man taking up his agency, or having his agency taken away. Later, we see him locked up in a cell with his brain completely souped out. And he is kept there so that he can continue to be a spectacle. And the line that we hear as people are walking by is, don't let me become that, or don't let that happen to me. Sorry, I'm trying to recall the details of this episode, but there's something to that degree, right? And that's when it's just like, bro, like that would have been bad enough if you would have not, like you could have said all that you needed to say and not cast a Black man in that position. Like the story did not require that. The narrative didn't require that. But yet that happened along the way, and that wasn't changed. And the thing also about it that Brenna brought up, we were watching this a while back, was that we know that race matters in this situation, even in world too, because one of the powers that the side cast members has is to change her face. And in order to walk into that bank without suspicion and to be able to kind of maneuver their way into where they need to be, she changed her face to a white man. And that's how she was able to move safely through that space. So that's one of those moments where you're just like, oh, this is a great example where we just didn't think about this at all, did we? And just like so many different ways that race plays out in this episode that we're definitely all clocking. And at the beginning of this episode, and in my opinion, is like, I love this episode. It's a super fun space romp, but we had to get over like that gross hiccup in order to like be able to enjoy the rest of it. And that's just not a cool thing to do to your audience over and over again.
Yeah, Caitlin, you picked the same episode that I was going to talk about, and the only thing I was going to mention is, in addition to that, is just talking about how that character in general just has, because of her shape-shifting, has the least time as herself. Like, she's the character that's played by the most people in general. So like there's also, and she dies first. So like so she's the first person to like get injected and go up on the spaceship. So she's the first person who's no longer relevant to the story. And then when they come back as like the fake guards, she's again not herself. So she's like the only main character of that has like the least screen time, and like her backstory is like nowhere near as fleshed out as like the other side character. So it's just this is really messed up. And one other thing I would say, if we just want to backtrack to midnight for a sec, is that I can't rewatch that episode. I've seen it exactly once, and I've done watch throughs of Doctor Who. So I've made, by my count, 4 different people watch through Doctor Who with me, and so I've rewatched the entire series 4 different times with 4 different people. And every single time I've watched every single episode except for Midnight, including Love and Monsters and Sleep No More, which tells you something about how much I dislike Midnight, that I will not watch it.
Thank you all. That was a lot. And I hope that people are listening, and I hope that people who, you know, don't have the same context to Nicole's point or the same experience really hear how easy it is to pull these to mind, for one. Yeah, like I asked the question and you all are like, here's 4 examples of when I was hurt. And how truly just, yeah, the impact that it has. In our last 15 minutes or so, I would love to hear about the moments that you particularly enjoyed with the characters of color. I want to think about Ryan and Yaz as, you know, our companions that we currently have, but any other companions that come to mind too. Like, I don't necessarily want to frame it as the show getting it right, but like moments that brought you joy, where some of the other ones did not.
I really enjoyed the scenes with Yaz and her family, where in Demons of the Punjab, where we just got to see them all together and see them like as a family, and like that whole dynamic. I think that was just done so beautifully and so well. And that whole "you're my favorite granddaughter" and the "mom, don't say that" was just like so hilarious to me, because that's exactly what my grandmother has done. She like will sometimes call me her favorite grandchild, and then my cousins will get offended. And it's just the exact same family dynamic. So like when I saw that, I like super identified with it, because that feeling of like, oh no, like I feel bad for my sibling or cousin or whatever that they're not the favorite grandchild, but like that secret delight of being the favorite grandchild is like, I just really felt that.
Yeah, you can tell that story was obviously written by someone who understands those family dynamics, and that culture. Like, it is so obvious to us, and I'm not even from that culture, but it is meaningful and it is important. And like, that's the key. That's how easy it is. It's just like, get them in the behind the scenes in the writer's room, because like those are the things that matters. It's not going to always click for the white audience, because those moments are for, you know, for people watching it, like South Asians watching that, and even like everyone else who just wants to see that representation, right? Like, that's meaningful to me. And I also would love to add that Yaz's relationship to her nanny in particular, like, and her posture towards her nanny's immigration story, I love that, because she realizes that Umbrine's life is, yeah, like she said, her life is Yaz's heritage, but it's also memories that include a lot of trauma, and that those need to be shared on Umbrine's terms. And Yaz learns and grows to respect that. And I just feel like that's a really nuanced perspective that so many children and grandchildren of immigrants can resonate with, like, universally. And I'm like, oh yes, that is so amazing to see on Doctor Who, because obviously there's so many families of immigrants in Britain, and obviously across the world, of people watching this show. And I'm like, this shouldn't have been the first time that has come up. And it was really, really powerful. And then I have several like other really like beautiful small moments that I love like this. I'll just keep going on the track of Yaz. Okay, so like I really adore Anita Patel, who's the officer who finds Yaz and Can You Hear Me? And y'all know how I feel about Yaz being a police officer and the show in general acting like police officers are a force of good in the world. But all that aside, I love that the person who changes Yaz's life in this moment is an older Indian woman. She also has like this really sage lesbian vibe that I totally buy. And I have no doubt in my mind that that is a part of what worked for Yaz. That is why Yaz ends up trusting her. And I know that when Yaz gets invited for tea, that she gets to meet Anita's wife as well. That's just like canon, obviously, right? So I would say Anita Patel is one of those characters in Doctor Who that is a side character, but like really well done. And I thought brought a lot of richness to that story and Yaz as a character as well. So it furthered both her as like a side character and like the storyline of a person of color, of a woman of color in the show.
I love that. Thank you.
I think for me, I really liked, and I'm bad with names, so I'm definitely not going to remember it. But Ryan, in Can You Hear Me? I think it was the same. I'm bad with the titles right now. But when Ryan is spending time with his friend, and his friend is like going through like a depression, it's so rare to see two male or MAC presenting people have these kind of intimate like conversations. It is always kind of like they always have to kind of put a buffer between them where they're never really real with each other. And I found the fact that they let Ryan and his black friend, like these are two black men, they're talking about depression and like needing each other or needing support. I thought that was one of the times and places where, and I don't know that they thought about it again as like, oh, these are two black men. They just thought, oh, these are men, right? And this is cool, but like it has even more meaning because it's two black men, and we so rarely get to see explorations of mental health that aren't toxic and aren't about like violence. And so I thought that was a really good. I wish we spent more time in that kind of world with Ryan, because up until that point, like Ryan, like we know he's great, but it's like he's great because he just doesn't do anything bad. Like he hasn't offended us, or he hasn't, but he's not, that's the time when you actually see him as a person and understand like how he moves through the world and how people will see him that are close to him, right? And so that's where I thought they did it right. Now, whether that was intentional or whether they thought about it the way I'm thinking about it, probably not, based on like the history of how the show has been written in this season in particular, but the fact that in that instance, not thinking about it actually made it more authentic of an interaction and of a story, because they didn't think about the different ways and dynamics that play, and it worked out. So that was one of the like more recent ones where I really was like, okay, like if we could kind of do this more, but like also if they try to replicate it, I don't know that it can be done and not be messed up, because it was kind of, I think that was one of those things that just happened to work out really well and happened to be organic. And I would just say earlier on, like, even though I don't think any Black Martha was being written, because if they were, they definitely did not pull rank where they should have. But I do think her interactions with her family felt very authentic to me, especially her kind of like semi-antagonistic relationship with her mom, because I know so many moms like that are like, especially when you have a child that is gifted or very smart or doing something that's like considered to be like, extraordinary, so going to med school, something like that. Of course, it's like, I'm on you because you have a lot to lose. So I'm constantly critical, but it's not coming from a place of not thinking you can do it, but more so not wanting you to be distracted. That relationship to me felt very honest. And also when you see the whole family together and the way they bicker and like the way they go at each other, but then as soon as something pops off, it's like everybody, what are we doing? We fighting? Who we fighting? Where we going? What we doing? Who, what? Okay. That to me was a very honest thing. And I understood that. Like, I mean, I will cuss you out right now. Like, don't come for me. But then as soon as somebody else comes for you, oh no, that's my family. Like, we're not about to play that. And so I love that. I thought that was actually done well, which is like made it all the more bittersweet than like when they get like enslaved. Like, for lack of a better word. But like the fact that like we don't get a super lot of time with them, but they in the time we get with them, like I can see this family in my head. Like I know these people, like they feel very real to me. So I thought that was another place that just it felt right and honest, and like that might have come from somebody's real experience, or just like, oh, maybe, you know, I went to dinner with my friend's family and this is kind of how it was, and then pulling from that real experience, something like that. But it definitely felt like, I just felt like that was at least that part of it was like, it felt honest to me. So yeah, I think those are the things that come to mind for me.
Mel, anything to add on this?
You know, just what everybody said about the demons of the Punjab, and I just thought it was really cute when Bill went on a date with Penny. Just two Black women having a good time before shenanigans happen. But it was sweet for a moment there.
Definitely. Is there
Ellen Penny forever.
Is there anything you all are really hoping to see in future, either with Ryan and Yaz specifically, or just, you know, in terms of representation and inclusion on the show?
I want Yaz to have time with the doctor without the brand new random white man. We don't know when he's coming, but we know he's on his way. So I very much just want them to not put him in a place story and like, you know, take up narrative space where time should be spent with Yaz. I kind of hope he's a gotcha, but I don't trust it. So, but I really just want Yaz, because like they just started kind of giving us like, okay, this is Yaz that you're going to spend time with, and then they're like, no, never mind, we're going to bring this white man in. So I very much just hope that they wait a little while before introducing a third character, you know, another companion, and let us really actually get to know Yaz. And like Yaz, like outside of being a cop, we want to know like what Yaz's things are. Like we want to know Yaz, and like I would like there to be space for that to happen. And also like romantically or friendly, whatever you feel about Yaz and 13's relationship, there is clearly a lot of like, they have a bond and they are clearly like, Yaz very much cares for 13. So I want that to be a thing that's not accidental. Like I want them to really think about like that relationship and like write for that relationship, and like whatever way, I'm okay. I'm fine with it if like Yaz has a crush, because I feel like if done right, this can be like an interesting storyline, because it's like this person has never had a female body. Who am I? You know what I mean? Like I can't never. But stuff like that. But again, I don't know that I trust them, but I would like to see it done right.
Like, okay, so obviously Yaz and the Doctor had the most underserved storylines in season 11 and 12. So we have a lot of catching up to do on deepening our understanding of Yaz. And we have just unanswered basic questions. Like, does Yaz still have a job? Is Yaz queer? What does Yaz like to do other than being a police officer? Basic questions. So please answer those. That'd be great. And I as well would love to see their relationship deepen, Thasmin or not. I'm not going to play. I obviously ship Thasmin, but there's like evidence for it. There's so much evidence for it. So it'd be really weird if like all of this was building up to Yaz not being queer. It just like, it feels like that is a very clear storyline that has hit many beats on like a queer coming of age story. So I want to see that being rewarded. In my opinion, they dragged it on too long, if that's where they're going. But I will absolutely be like flying my flag if it does happen, and be very, very happy. And yeah, there was one other thing, but basically just like basic stuff for Yaz, and just build on the awesome things that we see in her character already. And I agree, like there's just only so much you can do with 3 characters, as we've seen in the past couple of seasons, where we've had 4 characters and you obviously can't flesh all 4 of them out. So you really have to choose. So now that we have another one coming in, like, please just prioritize the Doctor and Yaz. And if he can kind of, I don't remember his name, if they even announced what his name will be on in the show. But our third companion coming on, or third character, I would love to see him play a really minimal role. And if anything, just kind of make more space for more character development for Yaz. I don't know how that would happen or why he needs to be there for that to happen. But yeah, I think we just have a lot of catching up to do for Yaz. And if that doesn't happen, just find me in the fanfics again. Like, I love her as a character, and I will never stop loving her. But a lot of it comes from the fandom, to be honest, because that's where she's gotten the most development. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the thing I want most is development for Yaz, minimal appearances from the new guy, who I can't remember character's name or actor's name, so I've just been calling him the new guy in my head. No offense to the actor, who I'm sure is a perfectly pleasant individual that I just don't want on my Doctor Who. Not non-Bon Jovi. Y'all are wilding in the chat. Anyway, yeah, you can find me in the fanfics on my fanfic podcast, Into the Archives. Yeah, so the we're only getting 8 episodes, so I will be spending a lot of time in the fanfics either way. But yeah, I want more for Yaz. I want so much more for Yaz. And I want more for 13 too, because for the character that the show is named after to be so underdeveloped is just obnoxious. I remember I was in Target on one of my rare trips into the wild west of the outdoors, and I was listening to the Queer Archive, and I was listening to you talking about how underdeveloped 13 was, and I just started snapping in the middle of Target, and people were staring at me.
Mel, any thoughts on what you want to be true for the future?
I also would like more development for Yaz, and I more than anything would like us to evolve past the point where we need a white male character, either as the Doctor or as a companion, for the audience to relate to. Because if I can spend my entire life relating to white male characters, they can spend a couple of years relating to a person of color. So let's change the dynamic around a little bit. I would very much appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This was such a great panel. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. I hope that you do check out Queer Queer Archive Pod with Caitlin and their partner. I hope you check out Into the Archives with Talia or at Archives Pod. And then be sure to check out Nerds of Prey too, which is a podcast that Mel has out. You can find Nicole at Black TARDIS, and you know where to find Black Girls Create. So
Thank you, DJ, for
Thank you,
hosting. That was
DJ.
amazing.
Thank you.
Love y'all.